Hello, hello, hello. I see that we are already live. Um, Let me wait few seconds before I will start an official introduction. Okay, welcome in the webinar held by SCM Rush. Today I have a very exciting guest whose name is Luis Rodriguez, straight from Mexico. And Luis will be today talking about eliminating hreflangs implementation errors. Luis has a very exciting job as a SEO lead in Uber, where he's managing his team. And yes, and as always, we will have the structure. So first part of this webinar is a presentation that Luis crafted for you guys. And in the second part, there will be a chance to ask questions, and we will make sure that we will have enough time to answer them. My name is Lucas Zelezny, and I am once again very happy to have you all. So, Luis, please, let's move into the presentation.
Thank you very much, Lucas. Hi, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. Today, we have a very tricky topic. I think it's one of the most controversial topics in SEO, and it's definitely one of the hardest things to crack. So hopefully this presentation is going to help you out to understand a little bit how to plan out to implement hreflang, how can we actually identify the errors and avoid them, but also a little bit of insights on what are the benefits of using hreflang for your business. So as Lucas was saying, I'm Luis Rodriguez. I'm currently leading the web and SEO team in Latin America for Uber and Uber Eats. So hopefully you'll get some nice insights from this. Let's get started. So for today, we're going to do a little bit of a recap. I would like to set the tone, and I would like to set all the different contexts that we need to understand properly what are we speaking about in hreflang, and perhaps providing some of the details that we were missing. As well, we were going to go through implementing hreflang. I'm going to go through a little bit of, what's the process that we follow up, and what is kind of like the ideal planning, and some of the key questions that you need to ask yourself before implementing hreflang in your website. As well, we're going to do an audit on some of those most common issues. And as Lucas was saying, we're going to go through some Q&A at the end. So as a recap, we're going to go a little bit through the origins. So where does hreflang comes from? Why does it come from, right? We're going to go as well through the purpose, because I think that is one of the most important things to clarify, what's the actual usage of this little line of code. And we're going to go through the three essential elements of hreflang, so we can clarify some of the myths and misconceptions that there is about this. So going straight to the origins of hreflang. So before this line of code was launched, there was no clear relation between international sites. What did that mean? So we all know that sometimes there are certain decisions in which we cannot influence, or we get in the middle of the way in terms of the implementation. You can find out that there's a lot of TLD domains, so there's subfolder, there's subdomain structures, and we need to understand that before getting into it. So in order to solve this, this line of code was created, so we could so search engines could understand the relation between different sites, regardless of the architecture and the structure that they were following. As well, this is to try to solve some of the issues that we had with no local results. So some of us older people can remember the times when you were searching for a flight, or you were searching for any kind of service that was somehow new to your country, but you couldn't get any more results beyond English results, or pages that had a lot more authority in the moment, but didn't particularly serve your location or your geolocation. As well, so this is a bit of a way to try to standardize how this relationship was created between websites, right? Because it was not very clear, neither for the users, neither for search engines. So through the RFC 5988, which I did not read completely, but it's definitely a very interesting technical document to look through it. It's basically, the entire clarification on how this is a problem, how this is a gap, and how hreflang is going to solve these through the various attributes that they have. So in terms of the purpose, obviously, in the very first thing that I believe most SEOs we need to focus on, it's the user experience, right? I think that it's very different when you're actually trying to buy something, but you're only finding results from other countries, from other locations. There's no certainty if you can actually get these items from straight away. And I believe that in order to make a significant impact in your business, you need to provide a good user experience, and that involves the SRP of Google. I think that it's important that the entire sort of brand or marketing experience starts when somebody searches for something, and they can actually find the right the right location, the right version of your website, but also they can actually have a better experience into using your services or buying your products. As well, this is a little bit to understand and to provide some insights to search engines on what content is similar to another one. So I'm going to give a little bit of an example here. In the past, we faced some challenges with Spanish in specific, right? When there's not a lot of different ways to say take a ride, use the Uber app, and all this kind of stuff. But we do need to understand that there are different ways to speak in different countries, that there might be CTAs that respond better in other countries. So in order for us to tailor some content that goes specifically to one to one geolocation and to one audience, I think that it's important that we understand and we try to create this relationship between the similarities of content that we have. Now, big heads up here, the hreflang in general is not to avoid duplicated content issues. In general, it's mostly to provide this relationship and to declare it formally to our search engines and avoid having any sort of issues with people from Malaysia landing in the Indian page, right? I mean, it wouldn't make sense for that. Then lastly, it's also a lot about the audience. I think I already touched a little bit on this topic. Nevertheless, it's important to understand that just people speak differently. And people, even if they have the same language, even if it's the same topic, would try to get something different from the content or the products and services that you're providing. So I think that it's very important, once we start understanding that we need to create hreflang, that we also understand, what the audience is, what do they want, how do they speak, how do they search for our products specifically, because it can be one of the factors in which success is going to be embroidered a little bit. Right, so going straight into the 3 essential elements, I think that it's important to spend some time looking at this. So first of all, it's obviously the attribute, right? I think that that's very, very straightforward. The second one is the language and the country code. So I think I'm going to stop a little bit here and make a significant difference between what's the language and what's the country, right? So first of all, the language itself, it's something that is a must into this little line of code. The country, it's something that it's up to you, basically. So, for example, in Spanish, you can have a page for Spanish that is not targeting a specific country that speaks Spanish. You can have an international Spanish page in which users that speak Spanish across the world, they can go through it, right? A different scenario would be, for example, with Bahasa Malay, for example. Right? I think that you would need to actually make the clarification like, hey, this is Bahasa from Malaysia. This is Bahasa from Indonesia. So I think that it's important that we keep in mind, that these two things don't need to be one with another, and we can split them out. So I'm going to touch a little bit more on the planning of that part and what are the key questions to do in the next session of this presentation. But keep in mind, guys, not everything needs to have a specific page. I mean, not that every country needs to have a specific line of code for that. We need to understand that one thing is the audience, another thing is the language that they're actually using. Cool. And then, obviously, the alternative that we can provide, right? Good. Going a little bit into implementing hreflang. This is going to be a little bit of the tricky part. And let's go first for the planning session. So I believe that, sometimes in SEO, it's very easy to jump straight away into solutions and not really thinking about that part of the problem itself and what are we trying to achieve here. So as an advice, guys, I would always invite you to take your proper time to plan out this, because as we know, engineering resources dedicated to SEO are not the most common ones. Nevertheless, once we actually get to those teams and then to get those engineering resources working with SEO, it's important that we have a clear plan, that we have clear targets, and that we have a clear goal to pursue. So going into that, the first part that I would plan out, it's the geolocation. So one of the key questions that we can make here to clarify that is, where do we have business? Where can we serve? Where can we actually provide our insights or our value to those users? I know for a fact that sometimes it's very difficult, to follow pressure of like, let's get more sessions, let's get more users into our website, without really thinking, can we actually serve this person? Can we actually provide the full experience of our services or products just by having this, right? Because, for example, let's say that we do not have a good delivery method in a specific country. Why should we target that country? Why should we start getting some organic traction into our website if we cannot get it done there? The opposite would be when we actually have a lot of different people speaking, the languages that we are managing, and we can provide the full-on service. There's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't deploy one page there and start capturing their attention. So I think that this is a decision that needs to be together with partners on the business side, but also on the broader marketing organization, so we can be aligned in terms of, what is the experience that we can provide for this. It's a very important key point. The second part is the languages. I think that I was already sharing a little bit more about that before. So what languages do our audiences usually speak or read? I think that, there are several cases around the world in which it's very interesting that the official language is not particularly the language in which people search for things. So, for example, in the Philippines, most of the people would speak in their daily lives and everything else Tagalog, which is, Filipino language, basically. But nevertheless, on searches, it's always in English. Like, most of the people will search things in English, and that presents a challenge itself, right? Like, what kind of languages do we need to use? Is it really worth it to put Tagalog into our website when we actually don't see a lot of traction coming from it? So I think that it's important that we try to understand further our audiences, and this is going to kill two birds with one stone. So what do I mean with that? So one, you can actually understand a lot more of the people that you're trying to reach, but second, you can learn of that audience and implement that knowledge across all the different digital marketing initiatives as well in SEO, right? I mean, I think this can help you out to craft your content and your CTAs towards something that resonates with that person and with that language as well. I think that, continuing into the example of the Philippines, there's also Taglish, I think is the correct thing, which is a mix between Tagalog and English. So sometimes people will actually search for those things. Let's think about more basic topics like financial products. I think that people will have the notion of the names of certain financial items if they're in their local language, or if it's something that they use more commonly to express. So definitely pay a lot of attention here. As I was saying in my previous section, it's important that we decouple the country and we decouple the geolocation. So let's try to understand that not because the people speak their language, they need a specific country code. They could just do with the actual language. Let's think about tourism platforms or services in which you have a lot of people moving, and you could understand, well, if somebody is going to Mozambique from the US, perhaps they want to find information in English, right? We need to understand that, yes, that could be the case, and we do need to serve those users. Nevertheless, you wouldn't need to have a specific page for Mozambique in English, right? I mean, it would be more about understanding what the person would search for without really thinking about their location. There can be cases that is the complete opposite. As I was saying, here in Latin America, most of the countries speak similar Spanish, similar versions of Spanish, and we do need to clarify to which market is this page dedicated to because of the similarity of the content, right? I think that we need to be able to say to search engines and also to users, this is for Mexico, this is for Peru, this is for Chile, and have like all those different markets covered in terms of our languages. Right. And then the last one is the pages. So not because you're implementing hreflang in one page, they need to be on all of the pages, right? I think that we need to make a very consistent analysis going from the top to the bottom level that we have in our website to understand which pages, which URLs actually do need to have one hreflang. One of the most common starting point is obviously your home pages. Understand your home pages, and I think that once you understand your home page and the different verticals that you offer in different countries, it's going to be a bit of a trickle down situation, right? Always go depending on your setup, but let's say that we have subfolders. I would always advise you to analyze subfolder per subfolder in your verticals or your services and products to understand really, can we provide that there? Is it really worth it? Do we need to? Mainly because, hreflang as well is one of those things that every engineer will know as legacy, right? There's always legacy with these things. There's always some sort of weird setup. There's a line of code that broke. There's a new deployment that changed the logic of this. So I would always advise you to understand properly and to have those pages in kind of like your site all the time, so you can understand if there's going to be any change and how to avoid any of those problems. Cool. Going further into the implementation part. So where and how? One of the key questions is what would imply to the less engineering work, and is the solution sustainable? I think that this is something that SEOs sometimes don't ask themselves most of the time, in which we need to understand that there's always a middle point. There's never going to be a straightforward solution into solving the problem that we have specifically with hreflang, because we need to make decisions in terms of where is it going to live. Are we going to put it in line with the code? Are we going to include it into the header? Is it going to be living in the sitemap? But how exactly it's going to be working out in terms of moving forward. So for example, we can have a country now, but then tomorrow can shut down. So how is the hreflang going to respond to that part? I think that it's important that we partner up a lot with our engineering teams, with our product management teams, so we can understand what is the easiest and most sustainable way to implement it, because it's never going to be, a standardized way. I think that as SEO, we also need to understand that middle ground in which sometimes the solutions are not perfect, but we need to move forward. That would be kind of like my advice in terms of the implementation. Deciding this together with your engineering team, it's going to avoid a lot of pain in the future, like different changes, like the teams removing the line of code because they didn't know how it worked. A lot of the different nuances that we can have moving forward. It's very important that both organizations are 100% clear on what is the impact, why should it be there, and why should it be in certain way. So here, my biggest advice, guys, would be a little bit flexible, but also be tough in terms of how does it need to be. It needs to be sustainable. It needs to move forward, and it needs to respond to your needs of the business growing or shrinking across time. Cool. Going a little bit into the audit, we're going to open up our site audits part in SEMrush once this opens. Give me 1 second. So I'm going to reshare my screen with you guys. Just 1 second. Sorry, guys, taking a little bit of time. All right. So I hope that you see my screen, guys. So one of the things that I like to do, it's first of all going to my site audit part of SEMrush and basically try to put there all the information that we have. So one of the biggest advice that I can always tell you guys is that let's try to work with small samples of data. I think that if, for example, in this case, I added 200 pages for Uber, in which it already will tell me a little bit of the story that we have behind it. Let's remember that crawls are also very heavy on our servers, so let's try to avoid them just for the sake of experimenting or just for the sake of noticing what issues we may have. I think that it's very important that we consider those things. So let's go directly into the international SEO part, in which we can already see, right, that we have some hreflang issues. I think that it's important once we run this scroll to try to understand all these issues one by one. And it's pretty handy, right, that we have here why and how to fix it. I think that it's very, very important that the tool is giving us all the different insights that we need to understand the problem faster, and so we can create a solution a lot faster. So as you can see here, we have some issues at Uber. That's just not that's strange when you have a lot of different websites. So going directly into the issues part, we can see at the moment that here the tool is very good at highlighting how many issues do we have, and as well what that issue is. So I'm going to explain a little bit for going further in terms of what do we have here. But broken hreflang URLs, I think that that's one of the most common issues that we may have. So tell you a little bit about the experience with these broken links. I think that in specific, there's a lot of different websites that that change over time. It's pretty common to have remappings, to have redirections, to have new architectures, to have new URL structures. I think that it's very important that we always keep this in mind and have hreflang, if you have an international business, as one of the most P0, let's call them, or most important priorities whenever you're actually doing this. You need to remap, and you need to do basically all the exercise that you're doing with your URLs or your architecture of the website. You need to do them with hreflang as well. I think that it's pretty important that we try to understand this part so we can avoid this problem. This is a problem that can be easily avoidable, and it's just basically miscommunication with your with your engineering team in terms of, how does it need to be done. So as well, we have a lot of different issues in terms of, what the URL is, if the connection in the server is going okay, all these different parts. I would advise you guys to have them quite tied up and include them into your roadmaps, and as well into your different requirements for the team. Now, let's go for the last part. I think that one of the most important parts about implementing hreflang is really understanding the impact that it may have. So this is extremely important because once you actually take engineering resources, it's the most important part to justify how you use them, right? I think that that's one of the most expensive parts in the industry, but also it's one of the parts that can provide a lot more value, right? So it's important that we showcase that value. And for that, I actually like to use some of the features that are in SEMrush, especially for position tracking. Because as I was saying in the planning phase, it's important that we understand that we have a goal, right? It's not that we are implementing this for the sake of implementing it. So one of the best ways to do this, it's actually by understanding how are you ranking, in which URLs are ranking into different countries, right? So it's pretty handy. Let's go here. It's pretty handy to add some notes, right? I think that putting here a note in terms of the tracking so you can have it visible across, it's super important as well to document, but also to showcase and pinpoint the changes that we have in our site. So I'm going to put here just hreflang implementation. You can put here a little bit of description. Perhaps I would advise you to add here the subfolders that you're actually modifying, some of the keywords that you're targeting, some of the URLs that are the most important ones. I would always try to do that. Now, the other part that I always like to do whenever there's an hreflang change, it's precisely tagging keywords, but adding them to understand what it is. So for example, I'm going to put here Uber, and I'm going to put here hreflang change. That's in the case, for example, if we would have different different keywords and different pages that we want to measure in. So in this case, for example, I'm trying to track Uber in Mexico to understand if the people are finding the right version. I'm finding here that it's the right version, so probably this gives us an encouraging result in terms of our hreflang implementation, even if it has like some problems here and there. So this is a pretty handy feature. One of the best things that I can share with you guys, it's measurement. I think that it's very important that SEO moves away from that magical space in which things would just happen and there will be a change, and we're trying to work backwards in terms of all the different projects that we launch. So it's pretty important that you set this up. Another trick that I will always suggest, guys, is try to have control experimentation. Within the possible, let's try to avoid doing pre-post analysis to understand the impact, and better have a treatment country, for example. So something that we like to do here at Uber is to precisely test out some features first, test out some experiments, and then replicate across the world. So for example, if I was to modify hreflang, I would perhaps start with the Spanish languages, right? To understand how Google is reacting to these changes, to see if the people are actually finding the right information and going to the right page before deploying to other languages that might actually be more tricky than Spanish, right? So let me go back to the presentation. Once again, 1 second. It's going to be faster. There we go. Right. So I think that, going through these two phases of planning and implementation, guys, it's very important that you have your process defined. One of the most uncomfortable things to go to engineering teams, which naturally are more organized into Agile or Scrum or Kanban and all these different methodologies, is to arrive with solutions, right? I think that the engineering teams like when you arrive with problems and then you try to solve the problems collaboratively. So be tough on your planning part, be very specific, go to the deeper levels that you need. And then on your implementation part, do not forget to partner up with everyone that you need to. Every organization is slightly different, but that doesn't mean that we cannot find, this middle point between everyone and actually, put the emphasis into the business value that you will be creating. It's not that you're adding a line of code just for the sake of adding it. Actually, we're going to be creating money with this. It's very, very important that we're going to be doing that. People from other countries, people from other locations are going to start knowing and seeing and using our services and products. That's just invaluable for any company. So that would be my advice there, guys. And going to the last section before we jump into the questions and answers, let's go really quickly to some of the most common issues, right? So XDefault, that's one of the toughest ones to crack. So XDefault basically, it's the way that you can tell Google that this is the default language. If no other, it's actually going to be working. So that's one of the toughest ones because we need to understand if that's the actual case, right? Do we have a globally neutral homepage, for example, or do we have one of our verticals that it's exactly the same for every country, or we don't have variables for other countries, right? This is also very useful to to give some information and to keep the presence, the digital presence of some of your verticals, even if you don't have the service in that country specific. So be careful with your XDefault. Think about it a lot before implementing it, and again, test out before going for it. So issues with hreflang values, that's one of the most common ones. So please, there's an actual ISO that establishes what are the language codes and what are the country codes that you could be using for this. So please go to it and provide that list to your engineering team. I think that is very important, very valuable when the engineering team can easily go to one URL and just discover what all the values from all the languages and all the countries are. That's one of the most common mistakes because people may name the countries differently. So for example, one of the most common mistakes, it's English for the United Kingdom, when in reality, most people will put EN-UK. The actual value, it's GB, Great Britain. So we need to be very careful with that. And I would encourage you to go to that ISO page so you can check it out. Perhaps I can put it into the comments after this session. Right, conflicts with the source code. So there's always some issues. As I was saying, if you're not starting from scratch your website, you're always going to find some legacy. One of the most common legacies is basically canonicals, right? Where before canonicals were a little bit abused to reduce duplicated content and penalties for that, but that goes immediately into a conflict with the source code itself, right? Now, it's also one of the most common issues to put them into different parts. If you have them in the sitemap or you have in the actual header, that's going to create a conflict and probably is going to give us some issues moving forward. So be careful with that. Take a look at your codes. Decide on what meta tags need to go in there, and if alternate is any href flag is going to be one of them. So be cautious with that part. Then in the implementation part, obviously everything breaks there. I think that it's extremely important that we try to speak with our engineering teams and align on what needs to be done. How can we QA this? When is it going to be launched? Do we have service in that country or not? All of these things are changing all the time, and I would always advise you to keep an eye on them. If you don't have the service in one country, why are we providing with organic results that may confuse potential customers or clients? It would be a lot easier just to shut them down, right? So I think that it's very important that we try to take care of that part. Return tags as well. Every page needs to have a return tag, basically, and it needs to reference to itself. It's not that complicated, guys. Again, if we do a proper planning, I think that it's going to be quite fine that we identify that every page needs a return tag, every page needs to reference to itself. And lastly, crawling. So I think that it's very, very important that we try to understand that some pages might be actually activated by this link and they're actually not there. So be careful with that. Let's be conscious about, what can be crawled, what cannot be crawled, and move forward. So a lot of the times, we have a subfolder that before was no index or was blocked from Robert. We need to understand that if that happens, our href flag is not going to be working out that much. Cool, guys. That's what I had for you. I hope that this helped a little bit. And Lucas, back to you, and perhaps we can start with the questions.
Absolutely. Thank you very, very much. Very informative. I have no doubts that lots of people will find lots of added value. And once again, you can always go to SEMrush and you can do some tests. I really like the fact that you are using that selected part of the website rather than crawling straight away the whole website. It's very similar to how I'm approaching problems. And yes, I think I can only say right now that whoever wants to do a test, there is a trial version. And I also wanted to say something that we have a contest. So we have a tweet about SEMrush Conference 2019 in Bangalore this December. And there is a tweet that you should have a link already for. And please retweet this, and we will make sure that, we will consider you in the contest, so you have a chance to win free entry, and we can potentially catch up. Luis, you will be also there, yeah? So share the Twitter post and write why you want to attend the conference. Use hashtag #SEMrushConf2019. You will be there as well, yeah?
Yes, definitely. I'm inviting you all guys to come there to Bangalore December 5th. It's going to be very interesting, full of very smart people. I'm going to be speaking a little bit about how to implement agile marketing into SEO and all the different benefits that you can get from it. It's going to be quite fun, and hopefully we'll see each other there.
Perfect. So let me now go to questions. We have a couple of minutes still. So question 1, can you please show the source code of the website why the tool is showing broken hreflangs URL?
Yeah, perhaps I can share just a little bit more about that without really sharing the source code of the page. I think that everybody can go and take a look. But basically, it's because there's a bit of legacy, right? I mean, there's so, as I was saying, one of the most common things to have it's legacy. And recently we changed to a URL structure in which it's a lot more clear and decouples the country and the language, which helps us out a little bit to understand, different metrics and to track better, and to provide a better logic to actual search engines. So when that happens, we still have some of the hreflang values that point out to the older versions of the website. So that's going to give you a 404. And that's basically why the tool is showing that those errors on our side.
Perfect, perfect. Do we have any more questions? I'm just looking in our chat. Um, I have a one for you. Would you, because I think Uber is not the only website where you was implementing hreflangs. Would you tell us, we have a Halloween next month, the most scary story, like a horror story related to hreflangs. Have you seen any kind of crazy implementation? Because, people sometimes may implement this in the source code and in the sitemap and contradict each other and so on and so on. Maybe you can share a bit of this.
Yeah, definitely. In a previous experience in a financial comparison website that I was working on, there was the decision of just basically launch the site and launch the services across the world without really having these things tied up, right? So we didn't have customer service, we didn't have business development in most countries, but the idea was just to try to get all the traffic that we get, regardless of where they come from, to provide that value, right? I think that is a little bit of an old school mentality in terms of SEO. Just get all the traffics that you can get. And we ended up having there every single language permutation with every single country permutation you could have. So that's, I don't know how languages are in the world, to be honest, but that's 220 times 200 and something countries. So we ended up with a list like this on our source code that basically gave us issues with a really big penalty. And a lot of people just not being able to find anything at all. Like, it was just very confusing. So don't do that, guys. Plan it out.
Cool. We have another very cool question, and I think this is like lots of people may have this question: how to target Europe, as is no hreflangs for Europe? Should we mention each European country and the language of that particular European country, or maybe there is different method? I will try to start an answer, and please, join. I think if you have a website that is targeting want to target every country in Europe, then you can either go with the most popular languages like German, for example, which will cover Austria, Germany, and Switzerland, and then English will cover at least Ireland and UK. Or maybe you should go with X default because there is too many combination. Luis, how you would answer this question?
No, I totally agree with you. I think that it's a matter of something that I was touching base on during the presentation, which is decouple the country and the geolocation with the language itself, right? You don't need to have a German page for Germany. You don't have to have a German page for Austria, and so forth, right? So I think that if you just go for just the either the X default or just including the language itself, that could help you out to not just cover Europe, but for example, if you wanted to cover Spain, probably if you use international Spanish, that's going to help you out to cover in the future Latin America as well. So why not getting it done from the beginning, right? The same with, more weird, but with Portuguese, it could be a similar situation in which you could target Portugal and a little bit of Brazil, even if it's different itself. I totally agree with you, Lucas. I think that there's the need of approach of X default or EN. Now, the question is, can you really serve all of Europe at once? Like, is your product and your service ready to go to Europe, regardless of the country? I find that difficult, to be honest, because of how regulated it is and how you can actually have all these different expertise, between Poland and Spain. There's a world of difference of, how can you provide a service there? So I would take a little bit of a step back if you don't have this quite clear, and understand that perhaps hreflang is a second step for you. First, let's figure out how to provide our services.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just trying to calculate if you would really have a product that applies to different countries, you could go like with German, French, then you would cover at least Switzerland, Germany, and Austria. With French, you would cover France, probably Belgium. English, you would cover Ireland and UK. And then
that's pretty much it, right? I mean, I think that adding Italian, adding Portuguese and so on, that will be a little bit of scraping the barrel, because probably you can get 80% of the benefit by just targeting Central Europe.
Exactly. So a very good question. Unfortunately, there is no country code which would be covering whole European Union. And I would say our friends living in India have a little easier scenario because, they can at least target Hindi, and you may assume that it covers maybe not whole India, but good part of India. Maybe even more people than is living in whole Europe as such. But very good question. It's a bit more, I think it's on the edge of technical and philosophical, because it also touched
Yes,
the product.
yes,
Good.
definitely.
Very
Going
good.
international, it's always a political topic and a business topic. So I would
Yeah,
suggest always to keep it like that.
I think this is one of my favorite questions. Sumat, once again, thank you very much for asking this. Any more questions, guys? Okay, so there is like follow up from Sumat. Actually, currently we have only English language and target Europe, India, UK, US, South Africa, and Australia. So I think this confirms that you going with X default, that you not need to differentiate between languages if you're targeting with English. But again, the fact that you don't have other languages does not necessarily mean that you should not target these languages. Yeah, because
Definitely.
yeah, Asia is perfect example. Everyone was telling that if you're going on the Japanese market and you don't have a website in Japanese, it technically doesn't exist, because
Basically.
it may stick to us that everyone speak English, but there are some areas that it's not that common.
Yeah, and definitely, and there's a situation here in Mexico as well where people, especially developing countries, where I would put Mexico and India as well. People tend to find things online, a little bit more basic, and they like to rely on things that they feel familiar with it, because in developing countries we are still getting out of that phase of the internet. It's basically a world that nobody understands, and it's you're gonna get your money stolen, or all this kind of dodgy internet phase that we had. So when somebody searches for something and they see that in their snippet or in any part, there is a geolocation to it. There's Mexico in the URL, or you can find it in titles and descriptions. When you go into the website, it speaks to you in the version of the language that you speak. It's going to create more confidence to you, and it's going to make you move forward with the intention of purchasing, or probably it's going to create certain kind of loyalty, right? One of the learnings here at Uber is that we can't speak the same language and the same stuff to everyone, right? I think that between Mexico City and the US, for example, there's a very different reason why people will take an Uber. So in that line, we need to send a different message, right? And we can't do that. That people, let's say someone doesn't know that existence of Uber or any of other competitor, they will see that they will mostly search how to get from A to B, right? And the way that people search for those things and the way that they find those answers, it varies so much more, because people here, for example, they use it to go to commute. People in the US will perhaps use it more for going out on a Friday night. So we need to understand that the message is going to differ from that, and that we need to address it properly.
Absolutely. And then we have a follow up. There is lots of that's going on our chat. So I'm trying to catch. One second. Okay, this is more global. Anil is asking, it may be not directly related with hreflangs, but Luis, I think we should handle that question. We just launched our Accounts and Taxation Institute based in Jaipur, India, Rajasthan, greetings. And we have designed our website also in WordPress. How should we start SEO in 2019? What resources we should follow? Luis.
You have a very good question, and a very broad question that perhaps going to take us like 5-6 webinars to go through.
Yeah.
But I think that SEMrush provides you with very good starter kits. I think that one of the most difficult parts is that initial setup, but it's also one of the most vital parts of your website. If you're just starting, this is the time to get full on with SEO, because a lot of the things are going to evolve from the logic that you set up right now in terms of your URL structure, in terms of the content, and how you can start moving forward. So there's very good resources on how to here on SEMrush, and very good starter kits. I think that you need to go for that. You need to go and basically tackle all of your 4 pillars a little bit. Take care of your infrastructure, take care of your URL structures, think about your content. Don't write content just for the sake, and don't just pour out content. Think about it. Put yourself into the shoes of one of your users or potential users. Read it out and see if it's actually providing you some value. WordPress already offers you some off-the-shelf solutions in terms of Yoast plugin and so on that is going to pinpoint you at some of the main things that you need to take care of. But in all honesty, SEO is a thing that you need to tailor for your company. It's not a thing that is generic, and it's not a thing that you can just pull out and implement straight away into another website. You need to understand your services. You need to understand your business. You need to understand what do you want to achieve, and then take it from there. In terms of resourcing, I would always go to the blog of SEMrush, to the YouTube channel of SEMrush, which has extremely good webinars, such as like this one.
And I would also thank you very much. That's our great advices. I also would like to suggest that there is lots of video courses. Some of them are even free. You have Udemy, you have Lynda, you have Coursera. Some of them may not be a groundbreaking. Lots of them is very basic, but it sounds like whoever asked this question is looking for something that can start from scratch. So I think that would be good to start there. So video courses, and I have one more follow-up, and Sumat is going to win the competition, if we would have one, on the best question. So listen this. They wanted to target Europe, yeah, and now they have a problem, and this is what Sumat is writing. But we cannot show pricing in schema if we don't use country code to differentiate URLs according to region target country. So they want to show different URLs in different Google national versions because of the different currency and different pricing. Would that mean that this is justifying to start going with hreflangs, that they cannot use X default?
I'm not sure how this relates to hreflang though, because I mean,
they're saying that they want to show the pricing in the rich snippet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you need the URL for that.
Exactly.
Well, guys, adapt and move forward. I think that's one of the things. If you know, let's try to understand first: is that pricing really making a difference into our business? And then going for that. You know, I think that if you, I still have a hard time, you know, understanding how to target Europe itself, and then going for the pricing schema and the URL structure that you may have. That seems to be a little bit tricky.
So they have probably like a product which they're selling in France and they're selling in UK and they selling
different pricing
Poland, and not only pricing is different, but the currency is different. So they probably want to show the price in Poland in Polish zlotys, and in UK in pounds, and in France in euro. But if we're thinking that way, for me, it's absolutely natural that you need to start translating, because otherwise it makes no sense showing that a script description in Poland in English and then showing Polish zloty. On the other hand, if it's only the matter of showing currency in the rich snippet, and you really want to implement hreflangs because you want to show currency, I think this is not a strong enough case to go that far only for the sake of having this. You can go with rating stars, and you may get a very similar effect on lift of click-through rate. Would you agree?
No, definitely. I think that it makes total sense, you know. And again, it's a little bit of an exercise really to understand what needs to be done and what is the purpose of doing this. So once you have that, I think that you can find that middle point that we were speaking about with the engineering team. And there are several variants here. I think that you can either change your URL structure. That's always painful, but if you have a really strong case, why not doing it? And then the second one is like start creating those copies that you need. I think that would be kind of like my biggest advice.
Good. We will need to do a wrap up soon, and obviously, you know, Sumat, you have a very interesting topic, so maybe you can chase Luis on LinkedIn. I hope that this is absolutely fine, and maybe we can create a group, 3 of us, and we can try to think what can be done. How can we answer you? If you have any further down questions, because I think this topic is
it's very interesting.
Very interesting topic you have. So Sumat, find us on LinkedIn and we will try to follow this. I would also like to say thank you to SEMrush for having us. I would like to remind you that there is a tweet that you need to retweet and share with us why you want to attend an SEM conference 2019 in Bangalore this December, where Luis and me and a couple of other fantastic speakers will be there together with SEMrush. And yes, finally, thank you very much, you attendees who spent this hour with us. It was pleasure and honor to have you. And please observe SEMrush, because there will be lots of information about upcoming webinars. I hope.
Definitely.
Yeah, Luis, please wrap up on your end.
Thank you very much to everyone, and very interesting questions. As Lucas was saying, chase us up in LinkedIn, and we can perhaps ask you some more questions to you as well to understand the situation better. And I see that there's some questions that we couldn't go through in terms of more basic stuff of SEO and best practices and so on. I'm more than happy to answer all of your questions. Add me on LinkedIn, and hopefully we get to see each other in December 5th in Bangalore, and we can also clarify some of these things and hopefully have a very nice chat. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, shukriya, India, and see you soon.